Hello and welcome to Marvin Gardens, June, right? 2018. And we are starting this month from inside the brand new garden house slash greenhouse, whatever you want to call it, which we constructed. And I am going to insert some time-lapse photography showing us putting it up. But it is glorious, I think. Now, once it's been all put together, it's nice redwood construction. It's kind of sort of double paned plexiglass. Is that what it is? Yeah, and it just looks great. So I'm very happy with it. I've wanted a greenhouse for about a gazillion years, and finally have one. And we'll show you some external shots later. But in the meantime, hi, Tashi. Let's head on over to Chives where we already start. And I will say that you will probably notice I'm not holding the camera because, once again, in the summer months, I have the expert help of Mr. Craig Morris on the cinematography and kind of production director and everything else he's doing, helping me. And so that makes for a fun garden video. And everything has been reconfigured, as you remember from last month. But now all the grass is coming in, the garden is coming in, so it really looks like a garden. And especially with the addition of the greenhouse, it's really starting to look like, whoa, we've really turned this into something nice. So with that said, let's go over here to Chives, and they're right down here. And that camera, you can't get much closer than a foot before it goes out of focus. But and there aren't as many chives as we've had in the past, but I relocated them so they're kind of in recovery mode. And then right next to them is my parsley. I think I've got some flat parsley here where Frankie's tail is banging. And I've got some curled parsley down in here. And we've harvested a little bit of that all along. So that's nice. This is traditionally no man's land, which where we planted all the leftover tomato plants. And as you can see from here, we're getting tomatoes. These guys are a little bit on the light green yellow side, but I just fertilized them. So they respond pretty well to a little Miracle Grow. And it's interesting that these guys, a little bit further down the row, are a nice dark green. That's the way we like them to look. They also have little tomatoes coming in. So, oh, and now we're being joined by Tashi, who's the pug in residence this week, sniffing around. She usually follows us while we're doing the videos. But let me back you up to the beginning of bed number 1 here, which had just been planted last month. And this month, well, we've got some broccoli that's kind of overdue here. This guy needs to be harvested tonight. I mean, look at the size of this guy. We've already pulled one off. There's at least 3 here that need to be pulled. This one here is just coming in very nicely. It's going to take a while before it's fully ready. And then if you look just beyond the broccoli row to the first row there, you see some lovely huge cabbage plants that are beginning to head up. They're just looking fine. We've been keeping ahead of the caterpillars with a little bacillus, and looking very fine here. Then on the other side, if you swing around, the third row here of our brassicas is Skywalker cauliflower. And I don't know, am I getting that uncovered enough that you can see? That's just a beautiful cauliflower head, very close to being ready to be pulled. And the cameraman, who is also an excellent gardener, gave me a tip that rather than tie up these leaves to blanch the cauliflower, you just sort of break them over at the stalks here of the leaves themselves, like this. I'll show you. just do that. And that covers the cauliflower and allows it to blanch nice and white. So very encouraged by all the brassica production right now. This is a blank row right now where we have pulled a bunch of Bib lettuce. And I might intercut some stills of that. But we pulled them, retained the roots, cleaned them all off, and put them in Ziploc bags because we think they're going to store pretty well in the fridge that way. Now this is a radish that will never see a salad. It's gone way beyond. It's already flowering. Most of these radishes are probably beyond, harvestable. They just didn't quite develop the way that you want a radish to develop. But we did get a whole lot of radishes, and we've put them in several salads so far this season. These 2 rows are carrots, and it looks like some of these guys need to be thinned. And in fact, just for grins, because I know that these are too close together, let me see if I can pull one and see if we can get a nice baby carrot out of there. And that certainly is a very edible baby carrot. I just have to remember to come back and get that guy. But these guys need to be thinned out, but otherwise they're doing just fine. This is an earlier variety. It says so on the ends there. I can't remember what the varieties are, but they are labeled. Yaya is what these are. They're supposed to be ready early, and those are Hercules, which I guess are a larger, later variety, but they look like they're doing fine. Now, that brings us to our one big problem of the spring plants, and that's spinach. And I continue to have a problem with spinach. It does this kind of thing. It starts coming in very nicely, then the leaves turn yellow, then they wilt, then they just go bye-bye. Now, I've got one plant on the very end there that seems to be hanging in fairly well. All the rest of them are just misbehaving. So I have yet to figure out what I'm doing with that, whether it's pH or lack of, some nutrient. In the meantime, I'm doing gangbusters with lettuce this year. And this is another row of the Newman, I think it's Newman. Yes, Newman. New ham, not Newman. Newman. New ham. And they just do very well. And harvested at this stage or later when they finish up, they do fine. This row was a pelleted seed romaine lettuce, and I had very spotty germination, still have very spotty germination because I've replanted this a couple of times, but I did get 2 of them to come up, and those 2 look very fine. This row is beets, Touchstone Gold, which is my favorite beet. They seem to be coming okay. I might need to do some thinning in these closer spaced ones, but they are starting to form, so that's kind of nice. The last 2 rows here are purple something. Can you see the sign there? Yeah, deep purple bunching onions, which means they're just scallions basically rather than bulbing onions. And those are coming in fine. We had an entire row of that stuff that was started inside that we have harvested already and used quite a bit of. And these guys are coming in pretty good, so can't complain there. So that takes care of bed number 1 in no man's land, which brings us to the solar array, or the back side of the solar array, which I guess we can go around front actually. And the solar array's been cranking, although we have some issues with JCP&L in order to make sure that it's not getting too overloaded during the high peak hours. But it's doing really very nicely. I'm really happy. And this was the first month where actually I created more power than I used. So I got some credits on the JCP&L side for my solar generation. All right, so that brings us to, and again, I still haven't numbered these beds, so I can't call them by number. But this entire bed here, I've planted with onions this year. These are Patterson on this side, and everybody seems to be doing pretty nicely. In fact, I'm noticing now that there's a nice bulb forming right down in here. if you can get to this guy, that you really like to see this kind of stuff happening at this time of year, because that's a nice looking onion. And then this mid row here, I forget the variety, but I can tell you in a second. Red wings. So this is going to be a red variety of onion, and you can see the color in the stalk here, although you can't really see any bulbs forming. But I'm pretty confident that they're doing fine underneath there. And then finally, one of my favorites, candy, and we definitely see some bulbs forming here. Now this is a large onion. It doesn't store all that well, but forms great sweet bulbs of onions. That brings us on to whatever number this other bed is. I know, I haven't numbered them yet. I mean, anyway, tomatoes, and they're doing great. Look at them, they're climbing up the top of the cages already. In fact, this guy, see, it needs to be tucked underneath there, but I'm afraid if I bend it too much, I might snap it, which I don't want to do. But this is what I kind of have to do almost every day that these are growing so hard, is to tuck these guys underneath so that they come up through the cages themselves. But this first row is Juliet, which is, of course, our favorite. The second row, I'm going to go around the other side so I can read the variety. Damsel, these are called, and I can't quite remember if these are the big ones or the mid-size ones, but they look like they might be pretty good size tomatoes. And you can see there's a cluster of them down there. I don't know if you can get to those, so that that's a pretty nice cluster of tomatoes. And then the next row over are Valentine, and these are grape tomatoes, so they're even smaller, I think, than the Juliets, but you can see them coming in cascades around here. They look like they're doing fine, and of course they're all overgrowing the tops of the cages, which is really good for still being in June, which is when they first come out. The last row here is Balsino, and again, I'm not really sure what the pronunciation is, because I'm just going by how they're spelled in the seed catalog. But they're doing fine too, and they look like they might be a pretty good sized tomato, because if you look down at this cluster here, I don't know if you can get in there. That's a nice cluster of tomatoes down there. And that brings us to peppers. We got Carmen, which I grow almost every year and have such good luck with. And you can see some Carmens coming in, but they'll get much bigger than that. So we're just beginning with them. This is a giant Marconi, and they also will get much bigger than that. And they're sort of an elongated, but still blockish pepper. And King Arthur, this is new for me. You can see some coming in here, and I think they're going to get kind of fat, but for right now they look sort of elongated. And then that brings us back here. This is where I wasn't sure whether these are going to turn into artichokes or cardoons. Either way, they're supposed to send up a stalk, and I haven't seen any stalks yet. And if they're artichokes, they send up the stalk with the artichoke on the top of it. And if they're cardoons, they send up a stalk with a flower on the top of it, but you eat and harvest the stalk itself. So remains to be seen what's going on there. This row we got ground cherries, which are starting to come in here. I don't know if you can see that. None of them are quite ready yet. They're not ready until these little husks turn yellowish. And then when they do start coming in, Frankie will be in here grabbing them for himself because he loves it. And Vanina, she loves them too. This is Bee Balm, which I just bought on a whim because I had some vacancies, and there's another one down on that end. They haven't started blooming yet, so remains to be seen what happens there. But look what we got here. That's what you call an eggplant. Little, but it's an eggplant, and there's a little bigger one, even back here. These are galleens, and kind of a traditional shape and color eggplant. And we also, because of vacancies and stuff like that, we've got kind of a mixed row here with some peppers mixed in with some of the eggplants. And same with these last two rows here. Mixed row of peppers, and these are jalapeno fool Jews, which means they taste like jalapeno peppers, but they haven't got the fire. And I like peppers with a little bit of kick to them, but I don't like the kind where you eat one and you need to scrape your tongue, that sort of thing. So that's where I draw the line. So we'll see how these turn out. That brings us over to, look at these. These are summer squash, and I don't know if I might have planted these a little too densely, but they just look wonderful. And underneath here you can see the scallop squashes coming in there. These are sunburst scallop squash, which I've had a lot of luck with before. They're doing just fine. The next row over are actually a yellow zucchini. Now I'm not really sure the difference between a yellow summer squash and a yellow zucchini is, but whatever that is, that's a fine looking one, even though it's small. And look at it, look at how many are I don't know if you can see how many are down underneath those leaves there. They are just starting to take off, and to get summer squash before July 4th is kind of nice. This is zucchini. I forget the variety. It's probably down here on a label, but you can see there's many zucchinis coming in. Some of these, this is like a new one that came in, and it didn't really what's the word I'm looking for?
Pollinate.
Yeah, it didn't really develop the way it's supposed to. But this is a fine one. It has been pollinated. It's definitely going to turn into a fine sized zucchini. That brings us on to a little okra here, and this is a new variety for me, Candle Fire, and we've already harvested some, and it's a little late in the afternoon though, so all the blooms that might have been open this afternoon have closed, but so far these have been very nice. We've cut them up and had them in salads, and they've been very fine. The rest of this is all lima beans. Now I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but instead of doing any other kind of pole green beans, because we have gallon bags full of them in the freezer, I decided I would do all lima beans. So the first ones you were just looking at are the bush beans, and these are the pole beans. And I've got two varieties of pole beans, Christmas and King of the Garden. They are climbing, and what I think are the bush beans seem to be bushing okay, but way too early to get lima bean production. So we'll see what's going on with them as the season goes on. But I had grown lima beans before, but I just don't ever get much in the way of yield. So I thought, well, let me just do all lima beans and see what happens. Now this brings us to this is Jessie. Hi, Jessie. And Jessie is 14 years old, and she's starting to feel the effects of being 14 years old, but she's doing okay. So, but I thought I'd carry her around rather than make her walk. Anyway, this section here is spaghetti winter squash, and there may be some of those that are coming in, but it's too early to tell whether they're going to actually get pollinated and start growing. I see a lot of female buds, but I don't see anybody that's taking off as far as their growing goes. So we'll see. And my first pass on pest control, I still had leftover solution from last year that had too much suds in it, and so the plants didn't like it. But this last application, they seem to be okay. There. Now that looks like that doesn't look like. I think that's a pumpkin. The other pumpkin, the other winter squash, I should say, I'm growing, are naked, bare pumpkins. And they're not pumpkins that are grown for the flesh. They're pumpkins that are grown for the seeds. And that's what these two mounds are. So, and I think we might have a few in there. It's hard to tell. With all these early ones, it's hard to tell whether they're actually pollinated and growing or not. This one below the one that you're looking at here, yeah, that's the one. Looks like it might be coming in. Okay. This one looks like it might not. So we just have to wait and see how they go. I think that does it, except for we got a good shot perspective here for the solar panels, and a pretty good perspective of the greenhouse too. Franklin's been following us around, right, boy? I really showed you all the fencing last time around, but these are new. The gates. I finally got these guys constructed, and they look pretty nice. I don't think we need to go out to the corn bed, but it's worth a glance. Got 3 varieties of corn grown out there. We've got, I had a problem with vacancies, lack of germination, and some post-germination die-off. So I've got gaps in my corn out there, but they are looking, that nice dark green, and you can see that based, depending on the variety, they are waist to almost chest high, which is very fine for this time of year, because the saying is knee high by the 4th of July for sweet corn. Now we're not growing any sweet corn this year. As far as fresh eating sweet corn, the first variety we have going over here is a miniature popcorn, and I think in spite of the fact that I'm trying to cut down on carbs and doing like a keto based diet, I make an exception for popcorn. Then the next variety over is a blue corn, and the reason I chose that was we might attempt to grind that down into blue corn meal and actually make our own blue corn chips, depending on how motivated Vanina seems. And then the last section that we have out there is a colored corn. And like I mentioned last time, if you're going to be politically incorrect, you would call it Indian corn. Otherwise, the music stopped? Oh my goodness, we've got a problem. I've got to get the music started again. So anyway, that's, I forget what they call it. It isn't Indian corn. It's something else, but the label's clear out there, and I'm not walking out there to figure it out. So next month I'll tell you what variety that is. But that's going to do it, I think. We need more wood on the fire.
No,
Did you put some on there?
No, your wife did.
Oh, she's amazing, isn't she?
And I've been
Stoking it? Okay,
it.
good. So we got the fire pit going. We got lots of dogs out here, which, the more dogs, the merrier, right? We got lots of varieties. We got like pugs, Bijons, dachshunds, and, well, dachshunds. Should we go take a look at the pond and the fruit trees? Okay. All right, so what else can we show? Oh, I can show you the water features on the way. Those are looking kind of nice. We got, in this barrel, umbrella plants. What did you say these are? Canna lilies, which are blooming nicely. These are water hyacinths that are doing very nicely as well. We need to get some water in this guy because the level's kind of low. And this is fancy moss and or succulents that Vanina added to this guy. I saw a frog in one of these guys, maybe both of them, a little earlier. And as I mentioned last time, I've got my water lilies in this guy because the koi seem to eat them when they're in the koi pond. And we've got some more succulents here, and these are all pond irises, yellow and blue/purple, which are all done blooming, but doing fine otherwise. And back through the gate, that brings us to the pond proper. Now, something I'm particularly proud of, which is that white calla lily or calla lily? Calla lily. Which is the first one I've ever managed to grow, actually, because I bought those plants and planted them, and that particular lily came up after the fact. So it's the first one that I've actually, created. Not that I created it or anything, but it was fun to get one to actually bloom. We've got a corkscrew plant out in front here. I forget what these guys are called. Over to the left of the corkscrew plant. Those are water hyacinths that are floating around there that actually broke off from this floater. And the fish, if you can see them swirling around there, what they're doing is saying, it's dinner time. You want to feed us? So we're going to do that shortly too. And then up in the top there's another whole group of water hyacinths that are just clogging that whole front little or top little pond area that I have there. And succulents that Vanina planted are just sort of overtaking the entire rock garden there. It looks great, as do the purple. What are the purple flowers, Mary, on the pond? The purple ones? Ageratum. Ageratum. And I don't know when I stumbled upon them, many years ago, but found out that they just love being just soaked with water. So you put them along the side of the waterfall there, and they just thrive, right through the fall. So they're really nice. I'll take a quick look at these fruit trees, and then I think we'll be done. This is our little peach tree, and we don't have a whole lot of peaches, but we've got a few peaches. Last year it was funny. We had a peach and we didn't even know it until it fell off and hit the ground. There's not too many more on this guy, but he's otherwise showing some pretty good growth. And then at the other end of the hammock here is the nectarine tree. There's a lot more nectarines on here. But last year we had most of the nectarines were either rotted or partially rotted, so we only got like a few pieces of a few nectarines. But at least they're coming along. And then the pear tree, I'm really kind of surprised. We had so many pears last year. I wasn't really expecting many pears to come in this year, but there are quite a few of them out there. And so pretty much that takes care of it for the pear tree. We've got high hopes for that. We're not going to go out to the apple tree, which is off in the distance there. If you remember, the apple tree had apples on it, lost almost all its leaves, and then it ended up losing all the apples. We didn't get one apple off that tree. Now it's come back. There was very little blooming, and but right now it has all its leaves and looks pretty good. So we're hoping that it's kind of in a recovery year, and maybe next year we'll actually see some apples, but we'll see. Maybe not. And I think that pretty much does it, don't you think, Jesse? Think that pretty much does it? This is Marvin Gardens, June 2018. We're going to see you next month in July, which is, as I like to call it, the high holy days of gardening. And we've got a real garden going on, looks great, but in July everything kicks in. So we'll see you next month, and have a great summer, y'all. Bye.